What's your analysis, and can back-channel talks calm this down?
Well, Andrea, as you've said, and as Leon Panetta said as well, this is not the Israeli MO. Certainly, Israel does not use suicide bombers. And by all accounts, there were two individuals who detonated these explosives in a crowd of civilians. And that also is not something that Israel would do. So clearly, this is the work, I think, of either ISIS or one of the Iranian opposition groups that have operated in that area for a number of years. So I do think it's important for there to be a recognition that neither Israel nor the United States was involved at all. Iran has a lot of enemies, domestic enemies, in terms of those who oppose the oppressive theocracy in Tehran, but also ISIS, which operates inside Iran as well as along its borders, are probably the most likely perpetrators of these attacks.
I just wanted to point out also that Matt Miller, the spokesman at the State Department, has just announced the trip that Secretary Blinken will be taking. I'll be on that trip. And he's going to a large number of countries. They, of course, don't announce that, as you know, from your service until just before. But he is going to Turkey and Crete, also visiting Jordan, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the West Bank, and Egypt. So it is a very comprehensive trip. We know that the focus will be, obviously, the immediate crisis, trying to stop this from spreading, but also the day after, if there is a day after the Israel-Hamas war, what happens, who is in Gaza. And there's a big dispute right now between Israel and the U.S. over that, which really broke out in the public yesterday, with Israeli ministers, those right-wing ministers, talking about expelling the Palestinians from Gaza, and the U.S. saying that that is irresponsible and not the U.S. policy or Israel's policy. I guess the question is whether the Palestinian Authority can be built up, or whether these Arab countries, and you know them so well, you were stationed in Saudi Arabia for quite some time and ran the CIA, and, of course, were at the National Security Council. So will those Arab leaders step up to the rebuilding of Gaza and to some sort of governance if Hamas's governing and military leadership is eliminated?
Well, Andrew, I think we're still a long way from the day after, because I do think this conflict is going to go on for quite some time. But I think as Secretary Blinken is doing in this trip, is he needs to talk to the various regional players and actors, Israelis, Palestinians, Arabs, Turks, and others, to talk about what is going to come when we do hit that day after. And it's clear that the Palestinians really need to play a central role in whatever type of governance structure is going to be put in place in Gaza in the years to come, and also in the security formula that will be put into place. But the Palestinians cannot do it alone. They have to work with the Israelis and with other Arab states. And I'm hoping that Secretary Blinken is going to be able to impress upon the various regional players that there really needs to be an effort to try to prevent this crisis from escalating, despite the fact that we've had some strikes outside of Gaza. This is something that we just demonstrates how combustible the region is. And I do think it's United States policy to prevent any further escalation.
Is deterrence going to work? They haven't so far. There's pressure on the president to do more. Now we are told there's a new coalition that the UK and the US are considering taking action, perhaps launching strikes in Yemen itself against the Houthis there.
Well, the Houthis have a rather formidable arsenal of weapons that they have used against international shipping in the Red Sea. And clearly, this is something of tremendous international concern. The United States has a significant military presence in the region. And I think the Houthis demonstrated determination to carry out these strikes. Thankfully, most of them have been prevented so far. But the Houthis do have cruise missiles. They do have maritime drones. They have aerial drones. And I do think the United States, along with the UK and other actors, are going to take actions to mitigate the potential danger that the Houthis pose. And I do think that we have good intelligence about where some of these Houthi weapon systems are located. And we may be seeing some further actions in the coming days.
And finally, the administration and Israel, Netanyahu in particular, have been on a sort of seesaw in terms of the relationship, obviously allies and support, but questions as to whether Israel is listening to U.S. pressure, really, to scale back on the civilian casualties and do more targeted efforts and wrap it up more quickly than Israel wants to. Do you see signs that Israel is going to pull back at all change tactics? Because Netanyahu is still talking about months and months ahead.
Well, I think the Israelis are going to be there for months and months to come. I do think the Israeli announcement that they're removing, I think it was 4 or 5 brigades from Gaza is a good sign. I mean, that's close to 20,000 troops or so. But the Israelis do seem to be concentrating on southern Gaza at this point, and they're carrying out these strikes. And I do think that they're trying to be precise, but unfortunately, I think their tolerance for civilian casualties, while they're targeting Hamas leaders as well as Hamas weapon systems and arsenals, this threshold of civilian casualties, I think, really needs to be lowered, which is what Tony Blinken, I think, is talking to the Israelis about and will continue to impress upon them, that there needs to be a reduction in the number of civilians, men, women, children in Gaza, who unfortunately are bearing the brunt of this rather ruthless Israeli pummeling of Gaza in an effort to destroy, and understandably to destroy, Hamas's military capabilities.